Welcome to Pivot Points, a new series featuring some of the world's most successful women, candidly sharing their stories and insights about how they made it to the top and how you can too. Hosted by Perry Yeatman, a straight-talking global executive and award-winning author who created the career and life of her dreams and now wants to help other ambitious women do the same.
Hi, this is Perry Yeatman, host of Pivot Points. Today I am so excited about our next guest. She is another consumer products powerhouse. She is most recently a board member of Seventh Generation, but she has also been the SVP of Brand and Community at Lululemon. And prior to that, she spent nearly 25 years at Cheeseboro Ponds, and which was then, of course, bought by Unilever. So almost 25 years at Unilever, ending up as the SVP of Global Media. Not surprisingly, Unilever is where we met more than a decade ago. When I think of her, I think of three words: genuine, motivating, and caring. So it is no surprise that everybody loves to work for and with her. And I'm just delighted she could join us here today. Her name is Laura Klauberg. Laura, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Perry.
It is great to hear your voice. And I know where you are today, but everybody had to start somewhere. So could you tell us a little bit about what was the first opportunity that you think really launched you into this career?
Sure. I was working at Unilever, and I had been promoted to brand manager on Vaseline Intensive Care Lotion, which probably doesn't sound terribly exciting to you, but it was at the time our flagship brand in the company here in the U.S., and it was, an extremely high-profile role, extremely visible internally. It really was our biggest and very most important brand that had lots of marketing investment behind it. And what it did is it gave me the visibility I think that I needed at the right time in my career. And it gave me the opportunity to really build, my skill set, whether it be in strategic thinking or building advertising communication. And it was also my very first role where I actually managed people. Mm-hmm. And so that was like a whole new learning experience for me, and a really positive one.
About how many years in were you when you got this role, and what do you think you did to set yourself apart so that they chose you?
Yeah, so it was probably 3 to 5 years post business school. And I think that the prior businesses that I had worked on, I had demonstrated success and was, building brands and growing businesses. And I think it was recognized. And so, I felt pretty rewarded when I, got this position.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. And so that was the launch, and it obviously set you on a great trajectory in terms of working on big brands that really mattered. As you moved up, and I know you had a series of different marketing roles at Unilever, you had 3 daughters and you got married. How did you handle the compromises and the trade-offs that come in that kind of mid-career period when you've got caregiving responsibilities and you're really trying to build your career?
Yeah, those years were really hard. I often would have young women that would, go out on maternity leave and come back and want to, get some advice from me. And I would always be really honest and tell them that this is easiest time for you when you have an infant, and that it gets way harder. And, I continued to feel that way through that whole sort of mid-career phase. But, I would say that the 2 biggest compromises that I made, which were largely due to family, where the first was I really limited my job opportunities geographically. So, I lived in Connecticut, and there were lots of opportunities and things that I would get calls for that were in New York City. But at that point in my life, I just couldn't even begin to entertain commuting to New York every day. So it really limited, companies that I could work for if I did make a decision to leave Unilever. And then the second thing I did, which was I really got off sort of the promotion track for about 4+ years while my daughters were very young, and just to, I did that really, and I don't regret it for a minute, as, making both of those choices enabled me to strike, if you want to call it work-life, that was, it was a lot more tenable than, my 70-hour work week. And I personally don't even think there is any such thing as work-life balance. I'm not sure it really exists. I think it's really about what you can live with.
Yep.
And I think that's different for everyone, right? So for what I can live with is going to be really different from what you can live with. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody just has to get to a point where, it's all manageable for them. But just to share some of that story, my first daughter was born when I was a brand manager, and I was promoted when I returned from, a 3-month maternity leave. And that was like shortly after, we had been acquired by Unilever. And I had to go on a trip, and it was a 1-week trip, which I went to London, Paris, and Tokyo in 1 week, and the travel demands were increasing, and I just hated being away. At that time, actually, I had 2 daughters, and, I just thought, I really am not going to continue to do this. So I actually marched into the office that Monday, and I basically resigned. And when I sat down with the company president to discuss my reasons for leaving, he was really well-intentioned, but he told me that I should have either had my children earlier or later in my career, not smack in the middle of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Very helpful. I'm not going to put them back.
A really interesting response. But then he went on, to ask me if I would consider working part-time. And I had never thought anything like that was ever even possible because I was working 60, 70 hours a week. I couldn't even imagine how a brand management role, could be part-time. And so he asked me to give him a few weeks to work on it. And so then, which I did. And then the company came back and they created really the first part-time position. I think I was actually the second female manager to ever even have a baby. And, the first year I felt like I was a glorified admin as the role, it wasn't very meaty. The work wasn't challenging. It wasn't a standard brand management role. It was more project-based. I'm not sure they really knew what to do with me. And I was really bored, but I was willing to do it because I, had gotten the flexibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got the flexibility that I wanted.
Yep.
But then a year later, things changed pretty dramatically. There was a new senior leader. He recognized that there were ways to challenge me, and he just piled on the work. And the work became a lot more challenging, a lot more interesting, and I was getting paid for 3 days a week. I was working closer to 4 to 5, but at least I wasn't there on, working Saturdays and Sundays, which is what I'd been doing before. And, I was offered along the way opportunities to come back to a full-time role, but I kept saying no. And then I finally, I had another baby, and then I negotiated a 5-day-a-week role to do it in 4 days. And really what I was looking for was flexibility to work at home, which was really a novel concept, at the time, which is crazy when you think about how people all work from home now. But at the time, it was really like a new thing. If I look back, I'm really grateful for that whole phase of my life and some of the possibilities that, the company created for me because it really enabled me to manage home and work in the best way that I could do it at the time, So
that's clearly one transition, was actually transitioning to part-time. I want to talk more about transitions of 2 types. One, I'd be curious, how did you then transition your way back onto the promotion track? Because you clearly successfully did that. And then were there other transitions down the road where, I'm working with several, what I call kind of second act women, right? Women who have already had big corporate careers, have been very successful in what they do, but now they want to do something different. And even these women who are just so successful in their prior experiences are kind of sometimes paralyzed with, I don't know what to do next. So could you talk both about how you got back on the track and then other transitions you might have made?
Sure. So getting back on the track was as simple as raising my hand and saying, I want back on the track. It was really simple. They were ready to accommodate me as soon as I was willing to, sort of get back on. So that was really simple. But there were probably 3 big transitions that I could share. The first was, I left the Unilever consumer packaged goods business after about 15 years to lead global marketing at Unilever Cosmetics. So I still was working for Unilever, but just in a very different business. And it was our prestige fragrance business that was in New York City. And it was a really struggling business. It was completely different from CPG in terms of the people and our customers. And I dealt with fashion houses. The ways of working weren't completely different. And overall, it really was not as professional, I would say, as the CPG business. And the entire senior management team had all been fired.
I remember
couple
this.
Days. Yep. Yeah, a couple days before I arrived. And, needless to say, the team was on pins and needles, and absolutely no one was glad to see me on day one. And, it just took a lot of time and energy to win them over and really to gain their trust. And, in the end, we had really great success. We really turned the business around. We actually sold the company to Cody Lancaster about 2.5 years later. So the second transition was when I made the decision to move from brand management into media, which was really a big one for me, which really took me off, I would say, like the general management track. And I would have never considered even doing this, 3, 4, 5 years earlier. But this was just at the time when Facebook was sort of brand new on the scene. They had just opened up to users beyond college students. And the digital world was really just starting to emerge. And what was clear to me that all of us who grew up in traditional packaged goods marketing, we all knew how to make TV and print ads. That's basically what we grew up on. But we were all clueless about, what this new digital world was about and how it was going to radically impact, the relationship of brands and consumers. So I was really curious to learn more, and I saw this as an opportunity for Unilever to really innovate and gain a competitive advantage in this space. And we had always known through, especially through all the testimonial work that we had done on the Dove brand, that the most powerful recommendations always came from a woman's friend or her mother and not from an ad. So, I began to imagine that if we could begin to really understand this word of mouth phenomena that was, increasingly becoming enabled by social media, we'd really begin to learn about, what kind of impact that could have on our brand communication. And so I initially took on a role managing media just for North America, but then that expanded in scope to include Latin America. And then ultimately I raised my hand when the global media role became open in London. And, I never looked back for a second. It was, one of the best decisions I ever made. And it really allowed me to build skills in the space at a time when I would say that the vast majority of what I would call non-digital natives, really my peer group, knew little about all these changes that were about to upend, their entire approaches to marketing. Which really actually in the end gave me a real personal competitive advantage as well.
Huge.
So that was like a big transition, you know.
Yep.
And then just the third one to touch on was, when I made the decision to leave Unilever, which was after really in total being there almost, over 25 years, which sounds really crazy. And while I loved the last role that I had, I'd spent nearly all of my career with the company. And I was and this probably gets to the question you were asking and the advice for women wanting to do something different, but I really wanted to do something else. And I wanted to work in an industry other than packaged goods, because I'd really spent, even prior to Unilever, I worked at Clairol. I'd spent my whole career in packaged goods for the most part. And what I was looking for was to work on an iconic brand in an industry where I had a personal interest and a culture that was a strong fit with my own beliefs and values. And so I took the leap with, I will say, a lot of trepidation. I had people telling me I was absolutely crazy not to stay at Unilever. But I did have a lot of trepidation about whether I would actually find what I was looking for, and particularly at that stage in my career, because, we're talking about sort of the latter part of my career. And so I ended up moving to Vancouver, BC, to become the SVP of Brand and Community at Lululemon, which is an incredibly exciting business, a very different business. It's a designer-led business, which was also very new to me. And it was one which was largely built on community and influencers without a lot of marketing investment. Really different from my Unilever experience. But I learned so much about, creating an authentic brand that, the consumer absolutely loves. And the bonus was I got to wear black leggings to work every day and got into yoga and cycling. So there were a lot of great side benefits from that role. But, I guess what I would say just about in all three of these examples, I think, the learning curves were all high. The environments and cultures were completely new. And from a personal standpoint, there were big lifestyle changes, that were, pretty dramatic. I mean, commuting to New York, living in London, traveling the world, and then, finally moving to London. So, I guess my advice is to women considering doing things like that is to really just put yourself out there and don't be afraid of failure or being vulnerable. And I think these types of experiences are the ones that really provide you with the greatest, greatest personal growth, and they really test you as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt stronger coming out of each one of them, and I learned something different in each one of them.
Yep, I agree. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's in fact, I just wrote a piece for Fortune just the other day, and you've got to, I loved a quote from another woman who was on the program, and she said, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And I thought, wow, and it's so true, because the best experiences I had were the times when I took a wild risk, moving to Asia, then to Russia, then, working in privatization when I didn't even know what it meant when I got on the plane, right? And then going from 15 years of consulting where I'd kind of figured it out to corporate where, when you and I met, it was like, I thought I really knew it. And boy, it was a whole different world than consulting. And so, but every one of those things, they made me smarter. They made me stronger. They made me more resilient. And I just think, we've got to not go for comfort. If you want to have an amazing life and an amazing career, you've got to push yourself. You've got to stretch yourself. You've got to be willing to take a risk. And it's, the people I know that have the least regrets are not the people who didn't try a bunch of things, even if they failed. It's the people who said, oh, that looks scary, that looks hard, that looks difficult, maybe I'll just pass. So you've already achieved so much. And you were commenting even that, a few years ago, it was towards the latter part of your career. Now, I know darn well you're not going anywhere yet. So what is it that keeps you motivated now, and what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so what I'm so excited about is I'm actually going back to school in January. And I was accepted this summer into a program at Harvard called the Advanced Leadership Initiative, and it's a year-long program that's focused 100% on social impact. So
I love it. Wow.
Yeah, I'm over the moon about it, and I feel like I've really been blessed with an amazing life and experience, and I think it's an opportunity to give back in a much bigger way over the next 5 to 10 years. So I cannot wait to get there. I have my freshman orientation in about a month, and
are your girls?
I'm not living in a dorm.
I was just thinking, your girls must be loving this. Like they must.
Oh yeah. Well, what was funny? I had to write, like a paper or an essay, essentially on why I want to join the program, et cetera. And I wrote it, and I thought, I don't know if this is good or not. So I sent it to my 3 kids to read, and I asked for very harsh feedback. I said, bring it on. And all 3 of them were like, we have no comments. We think it's great. Don't change anything. So I hit send, and it went.
And it worked.
The rest is history.
Exactly.
So,
Well done. Okay. I love it. Yeah. I definitely want an update from the freshmen next year.
Yes.
It's going to be great. So every woman I know, it's not like all of us got there, scot-free and that it was easy, smooth sailing the whole way. Everyone's had to overcome some bad breaks or some big failures or, frankly, been on the receiving end, unfortunately, of some really unacceptable behavior. Because it didn't actually hamper your rise to the top, would you be willing to share with listeners an example of, what was one of the most difficult or outrageous things that happened to you, and how did you handle it?
Sure. There's actually 2 that I think are kind of interesting. One, and I'm not sure this is outrageous, but I think it's sort of indicative of the times. And when I, had taken on that part-time role back, I worked 4 days a week in the office. I did a ton of work at home. There were many weeks when I would be there 5 days. But since it was sort of this new concept for everyone, often I would hear in the office, and I would run into, and it was always a male manager, would say to me, oh, hi, is today your day in the office?
Ooh.
Which absolutely infuriated me.
Absolutely.
Because I was there as much as they were. Half the time they were traveling or even in. And there was always this inference that I wasn't contributing, when in fact I knew I was contributing more in 4 to 5 days that I was physically there and present. Not to mention the countless hours I worked from home, than some of them ever did. And it just made me absolutely furious.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little thing, so it's not a big thing, but it just was something that at the time I found really frustrating and felt that not everybody's recognizing, my contributions. But, I did have a really recent example, which I think, I'd be surprised if any of your other interviews are talking about. And I spent, after leaving Lululemon, I moved to San Francisco. My husband and I moved to San Francisco. All three of our daughters at the time were living in California. And I thought it would be a great time to maybe explore the whole startup world, because I thought, I have a lot of skills that I think could be valuable in that world. And I thought it would be fun to work in a smaller business. And I had already gone from sort of, the $50 billion Unilever to the less than $2 billion Lululemon. And now I thought it would be fun to at least explore that world. So I spent, an enormous amount of time, I guess you would say networking, but, talking to lots of people really in Silicon Valley. And what I encountered was an unparalleled level of arrogance that I'd actually never seen in any businesses that I've been in. And really what totally surprised me was real age discrimination across the board. I was rarely asked any substantive interview questions, related to...
What did they ask you instead then?
Yeah, no one asked me about my experience, my skills, my knowledge. Instead, I was asked, quote, how do you think you would get along with so many young people? Or would I get their sensibility? Or what time do you go to bed? And what I found shocking.
Did you tell them 6 p.m.? Is that a problem?
Yeah, I was like, you mean after I've been binge watching on Netflix? I just found it shocking. And after, my last role, I had probably, 100 people at Lululemon that were between the ages of, 24 and 32.
Totally. It's a fun brand.
And what I have experienced, whether it was there at Unilever, most of whom are desperate for leadership, for training, for development, for guidance, and value experience. And I was really surprised at how little, experience and knowledge were really valued in sort of in the whole sort of startup arena. So I don't know. That was just a big wake up call for me. And, you read a little bit about this issue. But I think it actually warrants a lot more attention than it actually gets in the media. I think it's a really big issue. In fact, I've even contemplated writing a book about it, but maybe that will be in 10 years' time. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, after you get out of Harvard and you put all that knowledge to social impact, positive social impact. But
right.
No, you're right. No one has mentioned that. It makes complete sense to me, sadly. But I do think that, and I actually think your analysis is right, which is I have found that most of these younger companies, even if they're billions and, the unicorns, whatever, that the people working there would actually love to have somebody who can help them understand what's going on, organizational dynamics, how do things actually get done, et cetera. And simultaneously, as long as you're, and you clearly are, and I am, open to learning, right? You took the media job. You said, I want to be digitally knowledgeable, right? You're not sitting there going, okay, there's one way to do it. And, it's back when the fax was invented and this is the way we're going to proceed. So I do find that really short-sighted, and it probably doesn't, they've done extremely well. I can't argue that point, and they have a lot of cool ideas, but it doesn't bode well for really being able to successfully scale and sustain those businesses if they can't make use of all of the skills.
Right.
All right, so let's move to the fun round. I call this the fun round, but it's just a couple quick questions that I think are not directly tied to career advice, but they're kind of insightful and fun. So the first one is, if you could use one word to describe your professional path so far, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I would say fulfilling. It seems kind of vanilla and boring, but I would use that word because of, I think, the smart and really high integrity people that I've worked for, the nature of the work, which has always been new and challenging. So I've learned something every day. No day has been the same. And probably most importantly, the great friendships that I've made along the way.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that it sounds like you really did have the career and life, as opposed to having to make that stark choice that sadly so many women made. So, excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who inspires, or who either does inspire you or has inspired you?
Yeah, I would say if I look around, the two people that inspire me a lot are Bill and Melinda Gates. Really Bill, because he built an incredible company, but together they're giving so much back to make the world a better place. And, as we talk about social impact, one area that interests me is really how can the private sector work with the public sector to actually make the world a better place? Because I'm not sure the public sector can do it alone.
In fact, I'm pretty sure it can't. Exactly right.
Yeah,
Yep.
Exactly. So I really admire the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I would agree. They are, well, and they really were the inspiration for so many other wealthy business people to do the same, right? I mean, it wasn't everybody who made 50 billion or whatever the number was and then said, "Hey, I'm going to now step down and I'm going to spend my time trying to solve some of the world's toughest problems." And now you see so many other people signing up to that kind of pledge. So I agree. They're definitely worthy for what anybody might say negative about anything they've done. I think they are highly worthy of admiration.
I'm with you.
If you could have a superpower roundtable with 3 women, alive or not, who would they be and why?
Boy, would I love to do that. Like, facilitating that discussion would be really fun. So the first person would be Katharine Graham, who ran the Washington Post.
Yeah.
You know, I read her autobiography a long time ago,
So
but it has so stuck with me, that book.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was like either the first woman CEO of a Fortune 500 company or one of the first, you know, and it was in the late 60s, and it was at a time where it was kind of unheard of for a woman to have a position like that, and she was kind of thrown into it as well. And I think she faced so much adversity, both personally and professionally, and she just led an amazing life. So I would love to sit down and talk to her about her experience. And then Angela Merkel, I really admire. Mm-hmm. I think she, has so skillfully managed, the whole European debt crisis and has had, unwavering courage during the Syrian refugee crisis. And so I think it would be awesome to sit down and talk with her. And then the third person, I don't know, that's a toss up a little bit. For me.
Okay, you can have more than 3, so go ahead.
I can have 4. Okay, so I would love to have Christiane Amanpour, who's I think one of the most fearless journalists. I really admire her.
She broke so much new ground. Yep.
Yeah, I just think she's. I would love to sit down and speak with her. And Gloria Steinem. I just read her. One of my kids gave me for. I guess it was for Christmas last year. Her recent book, My Life on the Road, and loved it. And she was such a pioneer for women's rights and also has led such an independent life. I'd love to get them all around the table, and that would be a really fascinating discussion.
Thank you. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the interview. I just have 2 questions left. One of them is, if you could do it all again, what advice would you give your younger self?
Wow, there's a lot. I would tell myself to not second guess my decisions. Found that over the years I'd make a decision and then, I'd spend a week worrying about whether I made the right decision. And I think you just need to go with it and not look back and learn from it, but not to agonize over it. I think also taking the tough call on people. I didn't always do that in a timely enough fashion. And I think in the end, it's always in their best interest. So keeping that in mind. And then probably lastly, not to be shy about asking for what you want, whether that's, a position or whether that's, money. And I was never comfortable talking about money or asking for more money, but I've always been comfortable coaching others to demand more, including my own daughters, and going to bat for, my people who deserve to get more. So I guess those would be some of the things that that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that last thing you said about how it's so easy for you to tell other people to do it or to ask on behalf of other people. This is the number one issue that we are actually finding in terms of negotiating pay for women. Women they are fearless. I mean, we know this biologically. We are fearless on behalf of our kids. We will fight for our teams. We will fight for the organization. We just won't put that same passion and energy and confidence and everything into fighting for ourselves. And we need, in the same reason that, I mean, I'm sure that, when Kirsten was little and I'm working 80-hour weeks and whatever, it was like, I never got to the gym, right? Because I came last. She always got mommy time, but I did not get to the gym. And so there's got to be a way that we all can feel better about saying, there's got to be something I advocate for myself, I hold true for myself, and I can stand up for myself and say, it is not wrong to ask for this. In fact, it is my duty, my obligation to take care of myself and to demand this because I deserve it. Whether that's about money or time off or whatever, but it is tough. We've got to just turn that same amount of passion and power that we use for others, sometimes just help ourselves. So the last question. You have built the career and life of your dreams. I love the word fulfilling, right? It's been a fabulous experience. It sounds like overall, no big regrets. And so I'm not saying no mistakes. I'm just saying no big regrets.
Right. Oh, there have been plenty of mistakes.
Oh yeah, no, clearly. You can't even live that many years and not have any mistakes. It's a given. But what I'm curious about is, what do you think the most important thing is you would tell other women who are also now looking to build the career and life of their dreams?
Yeah, I guess the advice I would give would be to build a great team around you and don't feel like you have to be the smartest person in the room. Always surround yourself with people better at something than you. And I think it's important to always be demanding but fair, and to lead with empathy. Care about them, not just about the quality of their work, but care about their lives and their families and their dreams and their personal stories. I think always giving credit where credit is due and being their biggest champion whenever you can, I think are really, really critical to success and to have a fulfilling career in life. And, at the end of the day, most importantly, I think to have fun along the way. I've had so much fun and so much laughter, while in the office. And, it's something that, I wouldn't want to be there every day if I wasn't having fun. I'd find something else to do. So I guess that would be, what I would tell other women to look for as they are starting out.
It's wonderful advice. And I agree. We're going to spend so many hours working. And if you think about it now, we're going to have 50-year careers, 60-year careers?
Right.
Who knows, right?
Right.
So it's like, if it's not fun, boy, that is a really long period of time. So I think that, fun is great advice. And this interview for me has been fun. So thank you. And thank you on behalf of all of our listeners for sharing your insights and being an inspiration. Laura, it's been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you, Perry. All the best.
You've been listening to Pivot Points, a series designed to help ambitious women have the careers and lives of their dreams. To hear more interviews, go to www.yourcareeryourterms.com. And be sure to tell us what you think. If there are topics you'd like covered or people you'd like interviewed, please let us know.